Hi everybody, we are Phil and Karen Lazo, and this is another video installment with segments from our book, Trust Story, Inspiration for Handling Heartbreak and Facing Your Future.
We're also going to include a little bit of bonus content as well. So the theme for this video is trusting God for comfort. There is a verse from Matthew 5:4 in which Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." We have had a lot of heartache in our lives, and God has comforted us in amazing ways. But in this video, we are going to focus on dreams and tell 3 of our favorite dream stories.
First one involves my father. My father was a very godly man, and he passed away at the end of 2003. Very musical person and just a wonderful dad. The next year, at some point later in the year, I was leading worship at our church, and this is something that I had been doing for years. And one particular week I was leading worship. We had our weekly rehearsal, and the rehearsal really was bad. It was a disaster. And things didn't go well. The band didn't sound good. We were not very close together. Well, that night I went home kind of discouraged, and when I went to bed, I had this dream. So in my dream, I was leading worship at church on a Sunday morning, and it was just like our rehearsal. It was a disaster. It was bad. We sounded bad. The band was not close together. The songs were off. Everything was just kind of falling apart. And then suddenly we just kind of stopped and the lights went out in the church. Well, the lights came back on and I looked up, and in the audience was my dad. And my dad was on one side of the room. The room was separated down the middle with an aisle. On one side was my father, on the other side was my mother. They weren't the only people in the room, but they were both in the room. And I thought it was very odd that, number one, they were not sitting together in the room. And I ended up taking from that was because they're in different realms now. My mom was still living, and my father had passed away, and they were in different parts of the room, and they seemed oblivious to each other, that they weren't together in the same room. So anyway, I kind of looked at my dad, and he was just cheering me on. And he was cheering me on, and I could kind of read his lips. He was saying, keep going, keep going. And he was pointing at his ear, and he was saying, we can hear you. And he was pointing up, we can hear you. Keep playing, keep singing. And it inspired me to get the band going again and to start playing and to continue with the music we were doing, with the worship we were doing, because we were worshiping the Savior. We were worshiping Jesus. And it reminded me, and it was really reassuring, that the saints of heaven can hear what we're doing when we're worshiping God, and they are worshiping along with us. It was just a spectacular dream. It was great.
And it was so encouraging to see your dad again.
It was.
Also, another part of our story that a lot of you may know is we lost our daughter, Lindsay Grace, in 2003 in a car accident. A friend was driving her home from a sleepover and got in an accident, so Lindsay Grace was killed, as well as the driver's daughter. And of course, needless to say, we've had so much heartache coming from that. But God comforted me in a very personal way. I forget, maybe a few months after that, I dreamed that I was in a place and saw Lindsay Grace walking toward me. And she was gorgeous. Her eyes were shining. Her hair was not tangly for the first time ever. And it struck me as she was coming closer. At first I thought, oh my goodness, she's by herself coming all this way. And then I was enveloped by the feeling that she is safe and she's my girl, but she's not really my girl. She's really Jesus's girl. But she came up to me and gave me a little sideways hug like she always did in life. And then she walked on ahead. And in life, she always wanted to walk on ahead. She always wanted to lead the way. And she went through a turnstile and kept going and joined a group of people. So I went to follow her, and I tried to get through the turnstile, and I wasn't able to get through. And someone said, I can't go yet because I don't have my token. But the dream was so encouraging because she was beautiful. She was safe. She was totally fine about going on ahead without me. And it just gave me the assurance that someday I'll catch up when I
get your token.
When I get my token, when it's my time. And speaking of Lindsay Grace, we had another amazing dream story from a friend of hers, Val. When Lindsay Grace passed away, Val, of course, had a very hard time with it. She had other people pass away in her life at that time, and really struggled when the time came for her to go to college. She was having struggles, and she always prayed every night that she would see Lindsay Grace again and that she would be able to tell her goodbye. So years later, Val told me the story that when she was getting ready to start at Towson, she again was stressed when she went to bed, but she went to sleep and she had an incredible dream. And Val wrote down her dream for us to read, and Phil is actually going to read what she wrote in her own words.
Every night since January 18th, 2003, I prayed that Lindsay Grace was safe and that I would see her just one more time to say goodbye. Even though it had been 11 years, I never gave up asking to see her. The night before my first day of classes, I was so nervous. I said my usual prayers and I went to bed. But this was no normal night. In a vivid dream, I saw Lindsay Grace. We were both kids again, and we were sitting on her bed in her room. She was in some type of sports uniform. She told me to come play with her for a little bit. We played, and then she took me to her bedroom window, and she told me to look outside. There, sitting in the field, were Karen, Phil, Zack, and Brett, and a crowd of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Lindsay Grace told me that those are all the people that she is watching over. She took me back to her bed to sit down, and she told me that it was time to be strong and it was time now to move on. She handed me a friendship bracelet that she had made. She said, "Keep me with you." It was then time to say goodbye. She shook my hand and hugged me and said, "We will meet again. Tell my parents this story and tell them that I love them and that I am safe and having fun." I said goodbye and then woke up with tears rolling down my face with the calmest, most relaxed feeling. I can't even describe it. God sent Lindsay Grace at a time I needed her most, and I will never forget that moment. It truly was precious. I hope this story brings a smile, because it gives me a smile every time I think about it.
Val's story meant so much to us. We felt through it that Lindsay Grace was communicating that she was safe and happy and alive. There were two details about that dream that caught our attention. One was Val said that Lindsay Grace shook her hand, and it was funny. We always encouraged our kids when they were young to shake people's hands, so that's something I don't think Val would have known. The other interesting point was Val said that she was wearing some kind of a sports uniform, and I asked her later, what color was the uniform, and she said green. Val had no way of knowing that Lindsay Grace passed away in her green upward basketball uniform on the way to the basketball game in January. So that was actually what she had passed away in, and Val had no way of knowing that. I thought that was really cool.
We thank God for all these unexpected gifts, allowing us to be with our loved ones again, even for just a short time.
For those of you who have relationships with Jesus, we really want to remind you that He will never leave you or forsake you, and He will give you comfort and peace in ways that you can never imagine. It is our hope with our sharing our stories with you that this will inspire you to trust God even more.
If you're interested in hearing more about our story, about how God has proven Himself trustworthy for comfort, but also for preparation and for giving hope and purpose for the future, you could check out our website, truststory.org, or you can find us on Facebook at Trust Story, Phil and Karen Lazo. Thanks for watching.